Hey everyone, this is Tom Singer. Before we get started with today's episode, I want to inform you about a special offer that I have to join a brand new group called My Sales Call. If you work for a small business or if you're a solopreneur, having some people to talk about ideas and best practices and to have a focus and accountability around sales is so important. It's so easy to get caught up in the busy work that we don't do what we need to do to drive the sales in our business. So I have started a weekly call where people can get together and share ideas around sales and then make a commitment to the group of what they're going to accomplish for the next week. It's just like if you work for a big company, your sales manager would have a weekly sales call. This is your sales call. Go to mysalescall.com to find out more and sign up today.
Welcome to the Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do podcast with your host, Tom Singer. In each episode, we explore the interesting lives of business leaders, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and others who have a healthy dose of the entrepreneurial spirit. It is time to explore something cool. Now, here is your host, Tom Singer.
Hello, and welcome to or welcome back to another episode of Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do. Thank you so much for pulling your chair up to the cool kids table. If you're a regular listener of the show, you know that I started this so that I could have access to really smart people who are doing cool things. Because from time to time, in working for myself now for 11 years, and I'm a true solopreneur, I work alone. I have a couple of contractors who help me from time to time, but for the most part, I'm in this game by myself. And every now and then, I've hit a plateau or a wall. And I learned a long time ago that one thing is true, and that is success leaves clues. So I found that if I could get to have great conversations with really successful people, they couldn't help it. They were going to give me a nugget, an idea, a theory, or a concept that I could put into play to help me grow my business. And guess what? Because I do this as a podcast, it's here to help you as well. So I think today is going to be a fun episode because we're talking to a serial entrepreneur. We're talking to somebody who, when I talk about success leaves clues, he probably has a basket full of clues that he's going to drop on us. And Ben Lamm is the CEO and founder of Piper Giant. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute, but he really is. He's a serial entrepreneur. He has always been a technologist who has been chasing the next wave of sort of what's new in technology. And these days he works in and around AI and defense. And we're going to kind of unpack what he does, what he did, and why he's so successful. So Ben Lamm, welcome to Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Ben, I don't read the bios that, your fancy PR people send because I think it's better to hear it straight from you. So could you please kind of walk people through what is your history? How did you get into being a technology entrepreneur? And then tell us about Piper Giant.
Well, I've always been really interested in, technology. Since earlier in my career, I've always been really interested in technology. And I think I'm generally unemployable by big organizations. I think my family, when I was younger, thought that I would, be either an entrepreneur and, kind of find my own way and find my own path and do it my own way, or I would just end up being, unemployed and living at home for the rest of my life. I don't think they thought that I was going to probably make it in general corporate America. I've only had a handful of corporate American jobs, so I think they're pretty right. And so I started pretty early. When I was in college, I started an e-learning company. I had this whole thesis that, at the time, e-learning was black text on, a white screen. It was really, e-reading more than e-learning. And I thought, well, why can't we, e-learning be sexy? And to date myself, it was the days of Flash before, Apple and everyone else killed Flash back in the day. And so when that was the evolution of the web where everything went from static to everything had to move all of the time. And so I started applying that to e-learning. So built an e-learning business in college, some great customers like Genentech and Whirlpool and Toyota.
Where did you go to college?
I went to Baylor University in Texas.
Oh, nice. And where do you live now?
So I split my time between an airplane, Austin and Dallas.
All right. So I live in Austin. I don't know if you knew that. So
I didn't. My place is right there off South Congress, so we should get a beer.
I am all about getting a beer, and I live in South Austin, so that's perfect. So South
Austin is the only part of Austin I think that's still kind of Austin. I was actually born there in Austin, so it's been interesting to see the evolution of the city over the last, especially the last 10 years.
Well, it's so interesting because I don't actually live in the weird part. I actually live in Circle C, so I live in like suburbia. I live in like they designed the elementary schools and the Starbucks to all be part of my neighborhood. But around where South Congress, where your office is and stuff, that area is still the only true Austin.
Yeah, I feel and I hope they keep it that way. I mean, there's a Soho House and an Equinox and other stuff rolling in, so we'll see.
Yeah, once the Equinox comes, it's all over. So anyway, let's get back to your story. So while you started all this back in the days when you were at Baylor and sort of beyond.
Started in college, sold that business, and then I got pretty passionate about mobile. So I started a company called Chaotic Moon, which was one of the largest mobile app developers in the U.S. We worked on projects, everyone ranging from Pizza Hut to Starbucks. And we had this kind of joke that when people asked what we did, if we just asked for their phone, there was like a 90% chance one of our apps was on their phones. So we did that for a while. That company got bought by Accenture, got into mobile gaming. Nobody knew the gaming company that well, but a lot of people knew some of our games like Dragon Academy. That ended up getting acquired by Zynga. And then I got really passionate about AI. And so my partner from Team KS and I started a company called Conversable, which was focused on conversational intelligence and trying to, capitalize on this next wave of millennials in moving away from apps, ironically, into messaging and, building conversational models for companies for customer care and commerce. We grew that, and, a couple of years in, we had some interesting inbound interest, and the company ended up getting acquired by LivePerson, which is the largest consumer customer care chat company in the world. And then I started Hypergiant, which is kind of my the thing that I'm doing now. It's something that it's crazy ambitious. I think it kind of balances the altruistic side of me and also kind of the curiosity side of me with AI. And I'm in the process of building it. We're about 20 months in, and it's going pretty well.
So let's talk about Hypergiant. What does Hypergiant do?
It's a great question. You go to the website, you may have a lot of different answers. But ultimately, at the highest level, we think that there's a huge need for, and we believe that artificial intelligence and intelligent technologies as a whole, the whole category, has the opportunity to be massively transformative, and as transformative as connectivity and the internet. And so if you're going to, have that kind of power, where do you focus where you can have the biggest impact? And so we focus on buying and building artificial intelligence service and product companies, and at the intersection of critical infrastructure, space, and defense. And so those are all industries that have a ton of data, that understand the value of data. Some of them are a little more archaic than others, and they haven't gone through digital transformation, so they definitely haven't gone through intelligence transformation. And then we try to build software or buy software companies that solve big problems across those different genres, and then take them to market, through kind of the Hypergiant umbrella. So that's kind of the highest level. And then what a lot of people know about us is we actually spend a decent amount of money and time on our R&D lab, inventing the future that we were promised. And we work on stuff ranging from heads-up displays and kind of next-gen spacesuits, all the way to climate change initiatives using growing algae. So it's an interesting company. There's a lot of different pieces to it, but we've got just an incredible team of women and men that are kind of focused on the mission, but also are focused on kind of advancing humanity in some of these different areas.
So I absolutely love the comment you made about researching the future we were all promised. I'm a product. I was born in the '60s, so I grew up watching the Jetsons, and I'm still waiting for my flying cars. And
I said I kind of got some shit or crap. I don't know what the cussing rules are on this.
There's no rules.
I got some feedback because I actually said, I was promised flying cars. Where is that shit? And I said that in an interview. They printed it as is. But it's true. It's like we if you go back and if you even look at the Hypergiant brand, it's kind of this Venn diagram of an homage to the future that never happened, right? It was like it's high fashion meets government lab meets retrofuturism. And I think that retrofuturism is really important because, there was this period where we were like, we're going to have clean water. We're going to have endless energies. We're going to be taking we're going to have flying cars. We're going to vacation on Venus. And like, you've seen all these like 50s posters of that, we're going to live in a world without racism and sexism. A lot of that stuff we're going to have clean water. Just a lot of that stuff just hasn't happened. And so I kind of feel like we're at this really unique time from a geopolitical perspective where technology companies were supposed to usher in that golden age, right? And what did most technology, all these companies that were going to like do no evil and be amazing, what did they do? They stole our data and sold it to the biggest bidder.
So they were going to do.
So I want to build this company that like, people want to rally behind. And so, our messaging and our soul of the company is really focused on, while we do have to do a lot of work to, obviously make money, we want to make the world more efficient. We want to make the world better. And we want to be a company that people want to believe in, because I feel like that's been lost in technology. I feel like technology has gone from the usher in of the golden age of humanity. It's now technology companies are the evil bad guys that steal your data, right? And so I think there's an opportunity to build a company that stands for something in the technology sector.
You bring up such an interesting point with that, and we're kind of going down a rabbit hole, but it is true. The early stage of some of these Silicon Valley companies and beyond, they were going to treat people better, and they were going to solve all these problems of, male-dominated companies, and they were going to solve all these problems of racism and sexism and all this stuff. They were going to do good. They were going to help the planet. And now we have Amazon and Google and Facebook and all these places, and the employees are all writing tell-all books.
Right. And I mean, I think there's a function of, I think people, what is that old phrase, like, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. So I believe there's a lot of, great intentions, from a lot of the leadership out there, but in some of it is a function of scale, right? It's easy for me to say with a, 200 plus person company and not a 200,000 person company that I can keep our mission straight. I think if we do a good job, hopefully over time, as we continue to scale, we'll continue to stay true to our roots. And so I don't want to overly badmouth the Valley, but it's true, right? It's like there's trade-offs. And so I really think that we stand. I think it's a really interesting time to be an entrepreneur, because I think we're moving in society. Millennials and others are moving away from celebrating people who just want to make money to people that actually want to, make a difference. And if they make money while making a difference, that's great, right? But we don't need just another company that makes money. And so I think that people are starting to understand, the value of you can, make a difference and make money at the same time. And I think those companies are going to be rewarded long term, and I think they're going to be celebrated long term.
And the stuff I'm reading about the next generation who's just now starting to get out of college, this Generation Z, they aren't about. In fact, they look down on the people like Bezos and other people. I mean, they're very much like saying we need to change this. So I think the sea change is coming because they're all about to hit the workforce.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I went to this really interesting, I think it was Ernst & Young or one of the big consulting firms a year or so ago, put on the symposium talking about millennials. And, there's always this like weird, vibe that some people, older people have and brands have around millennials. But it turns out that millennials are actually insanely brand loyal, and they're actually not price sensitive. And so if you look at all of the research, they care about what people stand for. And if they believe in your mission, they'll pay more for your product. I mean, look at Patagonia versus North Face, right? They'll pay more if they believe in the core values of that company, and they're very brand loyal. And so I think that now it's an opportunity to not just make dumb stuff and then pack and then really well market it. I think there's an opportunity now to like market what you stand for. And so that's why I joked earlier about the Hypergiant website. We don't overly push like, here's all of the software that we have. Here is all of the technology we have. Here's all the AI models we have. I don't think that enterprise software is just bought off a website or an e-commerce site. I think those are, through directed sales and channel partners or relationships. And so we spend a lot of time on our marketing. You go to our social media, our Instagram, or anywhere. It's really, we want people to know that we celebrate other entrepreneurs. We celebrate other technology. We really want people to understand like who we are just as much as what we do. Because if you like someone and you like who they are and what they stand for, then you'll have a conversation, and then that could lead into opportunities, right? Like we get more recruiting off of our Instagram than anything, which is amazing.
Well, that is kind of fascinating. So you've been doing this a long time. You've had some really good wins. You've started some interesting companies, worked around interesting technologies. You said that you sort of kind of had that entrepreneurial gene from the beginning. So now that you've been doing it for a long time, what is it that you love about the life of being an entrepreneur?
I have this weird, insatiable curiosity. And so for me, the pursuit of curiosity, I've always been in technology, always been in emerging tech and in kind of emerging tech trends, but it's never been exactly the same, right? Like software is software, but ultimately it's in different sectors. And so I've always been passionate about technology, always been passionate about software. But at the end of the day, that's always been the trend, but I've always been in new categories. So I love that passionate kind of pursuit of curiosity. But, on the lifestyle, I don't know if I would wish, I wrote this one piece for Entrepreneur magazine about entrepreneurs are born, not made, because I do think that there's massive character flaws and defects in successful entrepreneurs. And so I don't know if I wish the entrepreneur spirit or the entrepreneur lifestyle on anyone, because it is painful. But because if you are a true entrepreneur or a serial entrepreneur, then you're even more dysfunctional, and you have that massive raging fire just to keep going. And I think that the best entrepreneurs, the people that I'm inspired by, are a lot of times not driven. I mean, economics are great, right? Like that's an interesting scorecard. That's an interesting thing that it creates wealth, which is interesting, and you can do a lot with it. But ultimately, it's that inspiration to do more, right, and push the next bounds. And so, I don't know if sleepless nights and being in 4 cities or 2 countries in the same week is something I love about the lifestyle. But it's something that I think I'm just somehow broken into.
Well, it's funny because I make my living speaking at corporate meetings. I speak inside companies and at association meetings. And so I'm on airplanes a lot. And everybody goes, "Oh, you're a professional speaker and corporate trainer. God, that is so glamorous." And I'm like, yes, I have no idea if I'm in a Marriott or a Hyatt tonight. I just...
I love that you said that. I mean, I hate that for you because it's the same for me. But like this week I've been in 3 different cities, and like I'll wake up and there'll be, I'm sure, I don't know if you've experienced this, but it's not every night, but probably several times a month, I'll wake up and be like, where am I? Like there's a 15 seconds of like,
oh, totally.
Where am I?
I've been there. The worst part is like going to room 1604 with your key and going bleep, and you get a red light and you're like, come on, bleep, 1604, bleep. And then you realize 1604 was your room last night in Pittsburgh. And tonight you're in Philadelphia and you're in room 129. It's like,
I have been there. And so, it is, I think it's over, like, I've written a couple of things that are darker, and it's not to paint a negative picture on entrepreneurship, but it's just, there is a trade-off. And I do think that people should be more realistic about it. And a lot of times it's over glamorized, right? Because people see the results of successful entrepreneurs. People see an exit, right? They read a press release, but they don't know, they don't know about the board fight that you had to approve the R&D budget to build a product that doesn't make any money. Like they don't see that. They just see, they don't see the times that your lawyers are talking to other lawyers. I mean, they don't see those moments, right? Or the times that you're fighting with your family. Like they just see you won this award, or you were with this celebrity, or you got to be on cool things entrepreneurs do. How exciting is that? Exactly. So they don't see the pain, they see the results of the pain. It's kind of like working out, right? Like you get the beach body, but you don't see the like, oh, well, I didn't eat bread for 7 years and I ran 1,000 miles a year or whatever it is. And I don't do that, but whoever does that, I mean, you see the results of it, but you don't see the, hour and a half in the gym.
Well, a friend of mine said the other day, because I spoke for a med tech company and I'd never spoken in that field before. And so I had to sort of dissect what do employees go through who work in that field, because they have so much regulation and so much to deal with insurance and all this different stuff. And so I had to spend like 5 or 6 hours just understanding, and I wasn't even talking to anything to do with, getting insurance approved, but I had to learn what the people in the room deal with. And they're like, wow, you got paid that much money, for an hour. And it's like, yeah, it really wasn't an hour. It was, it was like a full day of preparation, in order to do that. So I got paid that
time.
Right.
There's a lot on, and then when you're brought in to be an expert on something, they're paying you to be an expert. So you have to do the research. you have to show up and you have to deliver. And, that takes preparation, that takes work. I've got meetings with a big government agency in Colorado all of next week. And, I'm going to spend my weekend making sure that our decks are good. I'm going to make sure, and I'm going with the team. It's not just me going. And I'm going to make sure that the decks are right. I'm going to make sure that it aligns. I'm going to do research on every general that's there. And that's the work that it takes, right? Because if someone is going to give you money or their time or a combination of both, you need to be respectful and be prepared. And I think people miss out on all those extra hidden hours of entrepreneurship.
So that's a perfect transition to the next question. And that is, what advice do you have for somebody who's listening to this? Because a lot of the people who listen to this show, they've either just started a company or they want to. And sometimes they're like me, they're a solopreneur doing their own things, but sometimes they have something that's much more scalable. So what advice do you have for the person who's gonna or has taken that leap?
I don't, it's a great question. Probably should have been more prepared for it, but I should have thought through that, as I just said. But I don't think there's one answer of advice to fits all. People, you see these leadership books, you see all these different mantras out there. The two things that have helped me, and I don't want to say it's going to help everyone, is I try really hard to make sure that I take at least an hour a day to go out and focus. Like I'll either go for, and it doesn't have to be high exertion, but I'll go for a walk. I'll go to the gym. I will go. I will do something to just disconnect, because you will find that even if you work 23 hours, taking that 1 hour is really key. And it can be mindless. Sometimes it's watching Bravo, which is literally the most mindless thing in the fucking world. And so you can do that if you want. But taking an hour, the work will always be there. That for me has been helpful, and it's actually required a lot of discipline. The second thing that I would say is that no one, and this sounds dark, but it's true, a lot of people that are not entrepreneurs are not going to understand your problems. I got into this weird idea earlier in my career where I was raising capital, and I would call my buddies that worked at a great real estate company or whatever, that they just weren't going down the entrepreneur journey. So find a community of people that have done it, or entrepreneurs online, listen to podcasts like this, read books, get into the right communities, either in person or virtually, because people that haven't gone through it just won't understand. And that's not a mean thing. It's just people will not understand your problems, and they're not going to be sympathies to it, because like we said earlier, they're going to just look at the outcome. And someone that's working, if you're going through trying to sell your company or raise capital, or you can't make payroll, and you try to talk to someone that is over glorifying your lifestyle and your work, that works at a great retail job or a great restaurant job or whatever, they're not going to understand it, and so you're not going to find that sympathy. So I think it's really my closest friends are entrepreneurs, and it's because even in different sectors, because there is this common ground that, oh my gosh, I've been there at companies where I couldn't make payroll, and I'm like, how am I gonna? I got 4 days to figure out how to pay these 50 people or whatever. I've been there where it's I don't want to sell to this company. I want to sell this company. My board wants me to take this deal. I've had hostile board members. I've had to fire founders. I've gone through a lot, and unless you've gone through some of those trials and tribulations, you won't get it. So my biggest advice is find people that are experiencing it with you, because those people, even if they're in completely different industries, there are commonalities that you can learn from, but you can also have the right shoulder to cry on, because a lot of people just won't be sensitive to it.
I think that's great advice, and I live by it. So I'm part of a mastermind group that has now existed for 7 years, and it started with, there were 5 of us who were all professional speakers. One person left the business and moved on and took a job. And the 4 of us said, let's keep going, and we were going to always add somebody, but the closer we got, the more we thought that's not fair to them or us to try to bring somebody into this little family. They've become my board of directors. We have a monthly call via Zoom, and then once or twice a year, we rent a house somewhere and move in together, and we go through each other's numbers. We talk about marketing. We talk about, hey, that topic will work in medtech, or that, have you ever spoken to a law firm? And we give each other ideas. And the reality is that we always joke that without each other, everybody thinks they know what our business is about. Nobody knows what our business is about. So I think whatever industry you're in, you've got to find people who get you.
Yeah, and I like I said, I think that there's massive character defects that make successful entrepreneurs. So finding those other dysfunctional people is a good thing. Like
basket of dysfunctionals.
It's helped me keep saying like I've had these moments where like I can't give specifics on this particular deal because of NDAs, but I had one of the companies that I built and was acquired. You know, they were the second highest bidder. I wanted them to win, and you know, a very close entrepreneur friend of mine who's been a partner in a lot of business of mine said, "Hey, look, you're going to have to call this guy, and you're going to have to walk away, and you're going to have to just you have to have the guts to just completely walk away from this deal." And I did, and I would have done that without his 100% advice. And I did, and they came back, and they ended up significantly raising. It ended up working out great. But you know, that is because he had gone through those trials and tribulations, and it's really scary when you've got a bird in the hand and to say no, right? And so, you know, unless you've been there and kind of stared into that abyss. You don't know. It's just hard. And so I think I am so thankful for my entrepreneur peers and friends that have, you know, been there for me.
So Ben, one of the things I talk about when I go to a conference or I go into a company is I call it crossing the performance gap. And it's how do you overcome this paradox of potential? And my research behind what I call the paradox of potential is we get really excited about potential. We hire Becky into the company and we think, oh, she's going to do great. And a year later, we're transferring her out. It didn't work out. Well, how come? If she had potential, why didn't it work? And the reality is there's a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs who start businesses who have a ton of potential who just fall into that abyss. And then there's other people who have as much potential or maybe even less who succeed. So what do you think the delta is in that room between potential and performance?
You know, and you're probably a better expert on this than me, but for me, I think it's determination or some degree of rage. So, I mean, I had another deal, you know, because like I said, people see the tombstones, people see the other stuff. I had another deal and we were 2 days away from closing this deal. And one of my partners said something to the current CEO of the acquiring company. Didn't go over as well as we thought. And in 2 days, I mean, docs were done, $500,000 in legal fees, and they walked. And then, you know, we had an interesting company and we had other suitors. And so it actually ended up being a better outcome. So I'm glad it worked. You know, I believe that I think the universe takes care of us and we listen to it. We'll end up where we're supposed to be. But, you know, it's just determination. At that point, I think that there are these moments that would break people, right? It's like you're 2 days away from, you know, a great return for you and your employees and your investors and a great home for everybody. It was just a massive win and then fall apart after, you know, 6 months of deals and negotiation. I think that breaks people. And so if you can just like get up the next day and just go do it, you know, I think that's helpful. I was I don't know, like a month and a half ago, I was speaking at SpaceCom, and I was with one of our employees, and we ended up having meetings with, we went speaking all day, and then we had one of our advisors, Bill Nye, was there, so we had stuff with Bill, we had dinner with Bill, and then we had a drinks thing with Google, and so we had all of these meetings set up. Right, it was a full 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. day, to 2 a.m. the next day, and the next day we had to be at Johnson Space Center, which is 45 an hour drive south at 7:30, and got in the car, and he's exhausted. And that meeting was to kind of shepherd some of our VIPs and hosts that we were going to walk around and show some behind the scenes stuff at NASA, which is pretty cool. But it wasn't like an actual meeting. And my long-term friend and an employee turned to me and said, "I now know sometimes what I never knew," because he was an entrepreneur at one point in his career. He said, "One of the things that I found about you is that it's 6 a.m. and we went to bed at 2 a.m. and you are literally, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, drinking a Red Bull, ready to go to, 8 hours or whatever it was in Johnson Space Center. And it's just about putting in the work." And so that story, that was just a real recent example of, like, we were all exhausted, but we just had we made the commitment. You just have to go in there no matter how tired you are. And so I don't think enough time people just realize that part of the secret sauce is just putting in the work and showing up. It's like if a deal falls apart, go find another one. And it may take 6 months. It may take a day. It may take, in the other cases, the other example, it only took a little bit of time, but just show up and do it.
Absolutely. Hey, I've got a couple more questions for you before I'm going to let you go. But first, great. I got to thank the sponsor of this episode. So this episode, it's brought to you by PodFly Productions. PodFly, they take the time and the headache out of creating your own podcast. PodFly sets you up with the right equipment, training, and guidance to ensure that you're going to sound amazing. They do all the heavy lifting and the technical work so that you can focus on creating great content, growing your audience, and interviewing really cool people like Ben Lamm. Hey, if you want to start a podcast, and I know that some of you do, jump over to podfly.net/coolthings and check out the offer that they have for the listeners of this show. So Ben, I call this show Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do. What's the coolest thing you're doing right now with your company? NASA, I will argue, is the greatest brand that America has. Like, regardless of where you go in the world and what they think about, the U.S. currently or policy or whatever, people love NASA, right? Because it stands for hope and it stands for admiration. It stands for like kind of reaching the impossible. Getting to work, we get to work on a lot of really cool things, which is exciting. A lot of which that's but for big big industrial companies, and also for the federal government that we can't always talk about. But getting to work and getting to go to NASA Marshall, getting to go to Johnson Space Center, getting to sit down and understand the problems that they're working on, and seeing where you can collaborate and help. It's to me, it's a big open box of areas. But like, one of the things that our R&D team is working on right now is next gen heads-up displays for non-persistent heads-up displays for firefighters, for astronauts, for all kinds of different use cases. But it's like that kind of thing goes back to our core mission of inventing the future that we thought should already be here. Like, we didn't think of these things, but having like kind of that heads-up display like you see in a movie for astronauts to give them all the data that they need. It's a really cool project. It's an R&D project. Most people forget that the R in research and development stands for research. So it's not just development. It takes a long time to figure out this stuff. But some of the stuff that we're working on around space flight systems, imaging tech, and then also specifically around potential next gen. We haven't won anything, but the potential next gen astronaut suits, spacesuits, is pretty cool. So that's pretty exciting. I'm super passionate about climate change, so I have to plug, again, another R&D project. Focusing on how we can put our money where our mouth is and actually invest in trying to solve different giving our skill sets with the men and women that work at Hypergiant in robotics and in AI. How can we continue to perfect our bioreactors so that hopefully we can reach scale and critical mass and have an effect on climate change. Hopefully we'll talk Austin into rolling them out in Austin, which would be cool. I think those are the two big areas that every day, no matter what you're working on or what problems you're going on, it's like, oh, we're doing really cool stuff that we do. I was gonna say both of them. I was trying to decide which one was cooler, that you're actually doing things to help the environment, or that you get to work at NASA.
I know it's cool. And like, we haven't announced this yet, but we're also working on this weird food computer thing. Not quite ready to talk about it yet, but like, yeah, we were working on a lot of cool stuff that we think has massive impact, which we're excited about.
So do you ever have to pinch yourself when you're sitting there with people from NASA, realizing that you're talking to people from NASA?
I mean, what's weird is like, they're asking us ideas and questions, and I'm like, you guys work at NASA. Like, why am I here? Why did you let me in the building?
So I got to tell you a funny story. So I have a 23-year-old daughter, and when she was a little girl, her whole dream was to be the head of NASA. And because of her, it's not what she ended up going into. It's not what she does. But when she was younger, like age 10 through like 16, she would tell people, they go, what do you want to do when you grow up? She said, I want to be the head of NASA. And people would look at her and they'd go, oh, you want to be an astronaut? And she would look at them perplexed. every time. Like, why would you say that? And she would say, no, astronauts could die. No one has ever died in the control room. She wanted to like run the missions and then eventually run the whole association.
That's awesome. I mean, it's a great thing. Like, who doesn't love, I mean, space is cool. And it, to quote Bill Nye, space brings out the best in us. Like, there's been a ton of technologies and a ton of great international collaboration around space. And so it's a hard, it's a hard thing not to get behind.
So when you get to hang out with like Bill Nye, or you get to do things like this, again, I find that in my job, right? I get to speak at these conferences, and all of a sudden I'm sitting there, getting to have breakfast with, I had breakfast with Gene Cernan before he died, the last man to walk on the moon, because I was going to be interviewing him live on stage. So we had a private breakfast in a private room. And, it was like, I'm sitting here with the last man who walked on the moon, or I get to meet some other celebrity who's a speaker. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm having a drink with Colin Powell. Do you ever feel like entrepreneurs, when they succeed, opportunities come their way they never dreamed of?
Yeah, 100%. And some of them are weird, right? Like, Gene Simmons is a weird friend of mine. I mean, we don't see eye on a lot of things, but like, and I would say we're close friends, but like, he's like pinged me, he saw one of the previous companies, wanted to get involved with it. And I was like, no, but I'm not with him. So it's kind of interesting. He invited me to a couple of concerts. So it was just kind of weird and interesting, where it does create these unique opportunities, right? Which are cool. And sometimes they're weird and insane. And sometimes you create this, like even though I've done it now a bunch, like when I went with some of these folks on this, on one of the NASA tours, and they got to see some of this stuff, the look in these like amazing people's eyes that do all this great work, they were like childlike wonder behind the scenes at NASA, right? And so it's like, whoa, I've done this really cool thing, and now I've been able to show other people this experience. It's cool, and it is cool. It is exciting.
So we could talk, Ben, about you and all the great things that you've done and that you're going to do in the future for hours, but we're like a 35, 45-minute podcast, so we can't. But I love to ask the people who come on the show, when you look out into the world of entrepreneurs, because I think great entrepreneurs, I think they're observers. Who do you see where you say, wow, she or he, they're doing cool things?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So like, there's some obvious answers, right? Like I'm sure you've heard the Elon Musk answer.
Yes,
like
that's the number one answer. That's the number one answer we've gotten in 530 shows.
Yeah, Elon's great. It's hard not to get behind him, right? It's like, I think he's got a big vision for a lot of different parts of humanity. And I think he surrounds himself with really smart people that can execute it. Like, I think sometimes people think that Elon executes everything, but he actually has great women and men that execute a lot of those things for him. So I think Elon's an easy answer, and it's a great answer. Like, I aspire to him. But one of this is a newer entrepreneur, and she's more of a PhD student than an entrepreneur, but I believe in her. My entire career, as we've talked about, has been really focused on, the next emerging tech. But what's interesting is, like, even with like the bioreactor and other things, those are still emerging tech answers, right? And so there's a lady out of London who's actually from Delhi, named Shneel Malik. I'll send you a link to her. And I got introduced to her. I actually like read an article and was like, I have to talk to this person. She either is a PhD or is a PhD candidate in London, and she's from India. And she was like, the water in Delhi in this particular area was like highly, was highly polluted. And what happened is the pollution in the air, when it rains, or the pollution collects on the buildings, and then when it rains, that water runs down buildings and it goes into the water supply. And so she she's a designer, and she actually created this like bio-integrated design. And it's awesome. We'll get Fleischman or someone to send you the article. I'll send you the article. And she's so inspiring because she changed my perspective, because I always think technology first based on my entire career, right? Technology. The technology needs infrastructure, needs connectivity, needs power. But like, there are so many parts of the world that need solutions that are also low tech. So Shneel has invented these tiles that are beautiful, by the way. They go on the sides of buildings that you can literally that are bio integrated, designed in a way that like it's designed to grow algae. And so what's amazing is they do great carbon capture, the sides of buildings are beautiful and green and they're alive, and then it cleanses the air, and it also helps when pollutants go through runoff, and the runoff from a building goes through these tiles. It actually helps purify the water, and it's inspiring because it wasn't this mythical algorithm that solved all these things. It wasn't this like crazy, computer chip or robotic future spaceship. It was these tiles. There's no power. They're just tiles, just designed the right way. And she's actually made me think like there's got to be solutions for developing nations and certain areas of the globe to combat climate change and pollution and all these things that are low tech. You don't have as infrastructure. And so she was the most inspiring person that I have come across in a long time. I'm a huge fan of hers. So I mean, I love the Elons of the world, but like this lady who like literally like saw this need in her home and then went to school and solved it. That to me, there's nothing more entrepreneurial than that, right? Noticing a problem and solving it.
Amen. I think that's great. That's a great answer. And if you'll send me that link, I'll put it on the page on tomsinger.com/podcast that corresponds to this episode. And the last question that I ask everybody is, what do you do to give back to the greater good? Because here's my theory. If we're fortunate, and I think entrepreneurs, we're fortunate. If you're fortunate and you get to do what you want to do and you get to create your own path in the world, you got to do more than make money. I mean, making money is nice, but you got to do more. So what do you do to give back to the greater good?
Oh, it's a great question. So I'd say answer in kind of three parts. One is I do donate money just straight up to certain charities I believe in, because I think there's great people doing great things that you should support. Number one. Number two is time is a big commodity to me just as much as, or more so even than money. And so there are a couple of nonprofits that I'm excited about. I think are important that I, sit on advisory boards or boards and I advise, like the Planetary Society, which is, the largest space advocacy and outreach nonprofit in the world, which I think is really important because, I think specifically in this time and the non-militarization of space, it's a really important time, I think, for that. And I sit on some others that I think are interesting and important. And then the third is, and I haven't done this full disclosure until Hypergiant. So, it's newer, but, I really want Hypergiant to be mission driven. And so we're working on things like climate change. We're working on things like how do we make firefighters and soldiers and astronauts lives safer. We're working on how do we create software to make oil and gas companies more efficient, right? And because that's actually better for the world. Like people love to think negatively about oil and gas, but I'm like, yeah, in 100 years, they're going to be selling you your power. It's just not going to be made from, dead plants and dinosaurs, right? It's made from more renewable sources, but those energy companies aren't going anywhere. So the better we can make them, the better they move into this. And so, I try to spend a lot of our time at Hypergiant staying core to that focus. I haven't done that at other companies I've started. They've been mostly focused on a product or service or in the growth, right? But this one, we really do try to practice what we preach. And so those are kind of my big three things, right? Like the work that we do, not for clients, but out of R&D, we really want to make a world a better place. I'll give you one other quick example. We worked with the great folks at Booz Allen, and they released this AI model marketplace so that all these government agencies and companies could take models from all these different companies and use them. And the models that we developed, the first one was a disaster mapping system for first responders. That's not something that we had the ability to go build a whole business around or does it fit our thesis, but we had great people at Hypergiant that were able to build these models, upload them into the system so that FEMA and other first responder agencies can use satellite imaging and understand and prioritize and relevance rank where to help based on the most amount of damage, which you can't get from a street view. You'd have to get from satellite imaging. And so this is color coordinated. It's super, super effective. And and so even with that, we're looking at how can we invest the great minds of the women and men at Hypergiant to build cool things that can also help, right? And so those are kind of three things. The writing the check's easy, the giving the time's hard, and then making sure that no matter what we're doing at Hypergiant, we stay true to the mission is key.
Yeah, I loved all of that. And I've been asking this question since the beginning because it's something that I did when I started. And again, I'm a little guy. My business isn't going to scale. My business is me. But early on, my wife said, look, we're very fortunate. You're making some good money. What do we do to give back? And I didn't have an answer to that. And I talk about this on the show sometimes, but it's been a while, so I'll tell the story again. And that is when I started speaking professionally, I actually had a full-time job, so it was side money. We started taking just a percentage point or two, and we started giving it to a charity. And we specifically chose the Dell Children's Hospital, and we created an endowment called the Kate Singer Endowment for Craniofacial Research. And it now exists at Dell Children's and Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego. And I thought, maybe someday it'll grow to $10,000 for research for kids born with craniofacial abnormalities. Because my daughter Kate, who will turn 18 in just a couple of days, my daughter Kate was born with a condition where the bones in her head were fused together. And she needed to have her entire skull rebuilt. And there was no Dell Children's Hospital. We had to travel across the country, find the best state-of-the-art hospital and doctors. And at that time, we ended up at Rady Children's in San Diego. And then when Kate was about 5, they opened Dell Children's Hospital. And by the way, she's fine. You'd never know that they removed half of the top of her skull. It grew back. Her head looks like a cantaloupe, not a watermelon. I mean, it's all good stuff. Yeah. But we started giving there, and then we started splitting the money and giving part of it to San Diego. Well, fast forward 15 years or 13 years, it's now over $70,000 that we've donated and raised for the two funds.
That's awesome.
Well, and the thing about it is that I don't come from a family that has their name on the wall of a hospital, and I don't have venture-backed companies like some of you entrepreneurs. I'm just a guy who just gave a little bit and just kept doing it for 13 years. And one day we looked up, and that's what it was. So I was like, wow, if I can do that, just being a guy who goes and gives some speeches at companies, what if every entrepreneur just found a little way to serve? And I don't think everybody does. And that's sort of my little mission, is convince people to do it. In fact, I give a TEDx talk called The Art of Giving Small. And that's what it was all about, is how you don't have to be rich to actually have an impact. Because $70,000 is a lot of money for research.
Yeah, no, you're 1,000% right. On a little bit goes a long way. And like I wish I could sit here and say, oh yeah, I've always been like this. I haven't. It took a while, and it took some hard days in the mirror to get to the point where I did it. I wish I could, I wish I could say that I started like you guys did, but it is, not my entire career, but at least the last third of my career, I've been focused on this. But yeah, it is important, right? Like they when they always say that, the gift of giving, you get more as the giver than the receiver.
Yep.
And it's true, but you have to create that habit. And so it is important. One of the things that I think also a gift that, I hope I am highly inspired by the Schneels of the world. How can we, how can I, outside of money and time and direction of a company, how can we also do things, I think, that inspire that next generation, right? And so that's not just in giving, but in creating those things. Like, there's so much amazing stuff. I was at MIT and Harvard in November and spent a day at both, and just seeing the insane stuff that's being worked on is incredible. And to your point, $70,000 for research goes a long way.
Yeah, and I did it in $100 checks, $50 checks, $75 checks over a decade.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's the commitment, right? It's kind of like your point on giving and philanthropy and giving is very similar to entrepreneurship. It's about getting up, showing up in that habit, right? And just every day.
Well, Ben, I could literally talk to you for hours. This has been great, but do you have any last words for the listeners of the show?
I mean, just thanks again for having me. And, if you love artificial intelligence, space, trying to save the world, or at least play a little piece of it, check out Hypergiant.
Great. Well, I think I will be checking out Hypergiant. And I apologize. In the introduction, I actually mispronounced the name of your company. So you'll have to forgive me. But we got it right in everything we wrote down. So that's what everybody will see anyway. So I
didn't even notice. So
yeah, it's Hypergiant, not whatever I might have said that sounded like Piper Giant. I was just choking a little. But seriously, thank you so much for being on the show. And everybody can just find you at hypergiant.com. Is that right?
That's perfect.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, I so appreciate you, and I hope our paths cross here, since now I know that we're neighbors. Thank you.
We'll have to get a beer in Austin. That'd be great.
Awesome. Well, there's a lot of good breweries, so that'll work out just fine.
Yeah, that's easy.
And maybe you just come out and watch me do really bad stand-up comedy on an open mic night some night.
Oh, I'm all in. Because then you can mix like beer, tequila, and open night.
Right, exactly. So, and thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. I say it every show. If it wasn't for the audience, why would we do this? We wouldn't even have a show. I hope that along the way, the success that Ben Lamm has had, I hope it's left some clues, because that's what we try to do here on the show, is just inspire somebody with an idea or a theory or a concept along the way. So keep tuning in twice a week. We're going to have more interviews with people just as cool as Ben Lamm. I know you're thinking, Tom, how is that possible? How will you ever find anybody that cool?
The next one will be cooler.
It happens every time. The next one is always cooler than the last one. So, but in the meantime, go out there, make sure your ladder is against the right wall, and try new things. And while you're at it, have a great day.
Thank you for being part of the Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do podcast. Without your participation and listening to these conversations, there is no show. Connect with Tom at tomsinger.com and follow him on Twitter at TomSinger.